Ethan.
Oh.
How do you have any ex-girlfriends? We're all in committed relationships now, but
Do I have any ex-girlfriends?
yeah.
Yes.
How many of them are evil?
2.
Nice. Well, today we're going to talk about even more evil exes because we're talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the world.
Oh.
And then it goes.
Is he versus the world or his 7 evil exes?
It's the world.
Well, the world becomes against him as well. We're going to talk about it, Ethan. You fool. Now we're already in the episode. I was going to take a short break between, you know how we record in real time and then we wait here silently 30 seconds for the intro music to play, and then the episode starts and then we start talking.
I keep saying there has to be a better way.
And so now I was going to use that 30 seconds to go refill my drink, maybe get a snack. Go to the bathroom, you know, the stuff you can do in 30 seconds.
The stuff you do
and now
after
now
you start
recording the episode. Are you happy now?
A little bit.
Well, welcome to The Lore You Know, a podcast where some friends dive into fantastical and often convoluted lore of the media we grew up with and love. And here to bring you the mostly correct facts about made-up things this week are me, Fran.
Me, Ethan.
And I'm CJ, and look at us. Look at these boys together at last.
If you're on YouTube.
If you're on YouTube, also, if you're listening just not on YouTube, the audio version, we're also in the same room still. You just can't see it.
You might have imagined that we're in the same room previously, but we were not.
You might have thought to yourself, it really sounds like these three are in the same microphone. Like when you see old-timey radio people singing into the radio and they're all like taking turns sharing onto the microphone, like bobbing their heads in. That was not the case.
No, we could try that though.
We could. I'd have to get one of those old-timey microphones.
I feel like it would get real physical real quickly.
Yeah, that's why everyone back then was so fit, because they were they had to constantly like mosh pit around each other in order to share the microphone. Well, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know like what topic to do today up until pretty recently. And then I said to Ethan, we've been real negative lately. We've had a real negative energy going on. And then Fran said, well, why don't we do something that you know really well that you like? And I was like, well, all I know about is Zelda. And she said, but you also know about Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
And I said, that's right.
We have watched that movie so many times
it's
as a friend group.
It's my go-to get drunk and watch movie. There's a very good Scott Pilgrim drinking game associated with it that we found somewhere else, but we have sort of made it our own with our own rules. It's a very fun time.
It's only for the young.
Yeah, I was going to say, as we've gotten older.
Far too old to play that.
As we've gotten older, the rules have laxed a bit.
It's more just drink if you want to at this point, but you can use the movie as an impetus if you really need it.
That is a good way to, well, maybe not always if you want to, but generally just drink if you want to. But no
we're too
more.
old for that shit these days. To drink when every pop-up shows up on the screen.
Yeah, well,
that's just, we would die.
The Wallace bitch.
Do you
guys want to learn about Scott Pilgrim? You might think to yourself, I've seen the movie.
Sober many times.
Uh-huh.
And not
I
sober.
know all there is to know about Scott Pilgrim.
Uh-huh.
Well, to that I say, well, some people haven't seen the movie and maybe they want to know what the fuss is about, because I think there's a new anime coming out based on it.
Well, what should they do then?
They should like and subscribe and rate highly and send us a postcard from whatever city you're in with your home address and
your social security number.
Your mother's maiden name.
Yeah, send it to my home address. I'll put it up on the screen. It's sort of a dox each other situation.
As long as it's reciprocal.
But no, we will talk a little bit about the movie. I don't want to get too far into it because it's a pretty popular movie. A lot of people have seen it. We'll still talk through it. But
I still think it's a pretty cult movie. I don't think it's like a mainstream
It's a cult
movie.
classic, but also I think a lot of people don't realize how different it is from the source material, which is the comic books.
Oh.
Or graphic novels, depending on how you would
Did
categorize
you
it.
know that Scott Pilgrim was originally a book?
Yes.
A book?
I know, Ethan. Sometimes books can be good things if they have pictures in them.
Well, we've gone over 2 book series so far, and I was pretty angry in both episodes.
I don't think Magic Treehouse was that bad.
So I'm hoping that this book series is going to be different.
All right. Well, should we get into it then? Should we describe our protagonist?
I mean, we probably
Scott
should.
Pilgrim was dating a high schooler. Scott Pilgrim is not supposed to be likable. That's how I will start that.
Is that okay? Yeah, I will say I was talking to Lizzie about it. She is probably just as knowledgeable about Scott Pilgrim as I am. But she told me I needed to tell everyone that if you do not like the movie because you feel like Scott's just kind of a bad person, but he gets away with it and the movie's pretty okay with that, it's not like that in the books.
No, the comics definitely go, Scott's a bad person.
Yeah, well, it's a lot more about growth in that one. And in fairness, the movie doesn't have time to really analyze a lot of those things while still hitting on the main story beats.
I mean, it's just a struggle because Michael Cera is just so likable.
I know. Well, that's the other. I think if they cast anyone else, it would have been a little more like easy to be like, oh, he's a bad guy. I get it.
Right? Yeah, it's like that thing with Game of Thrones. You guys remember Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
And how Tyrion Lannister was supposed to be like a
little
pretty
dick.
shitty dude, but
Yeah.
because everyone loved Peter Dinklage so much, they just like wrote him nicer and nicer as it went.
Yeah.
To be fair, they ran out of source material in that as well. So they kind of had to do whatever they
started
wanted.
doing a bad job long before they ran out of source
That's what
material.
happened in this one too. But let's begin at the beginning of the timeline, not the books.
Oh.
Indeed. So this is a little bit of some background that they don't give you in the movie, but I will give you because this is a podcast about becoming learned. So lucky you guys. you guys out there.
Educate me, self.
Scott grew up in Canada.
Oh.
Toronto or Vancouver?
No, he did not grow up in Toronto. So maybe Vancouver. I don't actually know the town he grew up in, but it wasn't Toronto. It was a small town.
Vancouver's not small.
He went to high school with 2 girls and other people, but
Only 2 girls, class of 3.
that's not bad. Not bad, am I right, Ethan?
I'd say you've got like a 30% chance of getting a girlfriend in that situation.
Nice. It's higher than usual.
Way higher than usual.
So Scott grew up in a small town in Canada where 2 of his classmates were Lisa Miller and Kim Pine. Initially, Scott didn't seem to have a lot of friends. He just mostly played video games, as a young man is to do. But then Lisa started to kind of annoy him. I will say, generally speaking, Scott doesn't like go out of his way to make friends. He kind of is just like annoyed by people. Scott's a slacker, like just in his very core. Doesn't really do anything.
Doesn't have many ambitions.
Yeah, well, he doesn't do anything unless like prodded by other people, even when it's in his best interest to do so, as we will see as the story
Doesn't
goes
take
on.
initiative.
Correct.
Once again,
So,
not a great partner.
pretty much all of his friends are they just kind of show up in his life and then just kind of do the thing where you just like adopt a guy because you like having him around for some reason. And he's a pretty chill guy. So generally speaking, people seem to at least enjoy having him around enough to be his friend. So this is what happens with Lisa Miller. She comes over to his house unprompted a bunch and hangs out with him while he's playing video games and just kind of watches him, the original Let's Play.
Oh.
And the 2 eventually become friends. And Lisa, who is a little more proactive than Scott, wants to get more friends and wants to get in with the cool group.
Oh.
So she tells Scott that the 2 of them should form a band because bands allow you to transcend your social status and become cool.
Definitely in high school. Yep.
So they formed the band Sonic and Knuckles, and
I can see why that didn't make it in the movie. There's probably some IP disputes on that one.
Well, so, and another thing to point out is Brian Lee O'Malley, the author of the book, is a gamer boy for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of references to lots of video games. Most of the references are to Legend of Zelda. There's a lot to Sonic the Hedgehog, and to a bunch of other like old Nintendo IPs.
Yeah, a gaming boy who is very much showing his age.
And that's why if you watch the movie, there's all the like the 8-bit
Right.
sounds and graphics and stuff like that.
And so the two of them form their band, but as it is right now, pretty much it's just Lisa playing the guitar and Scott playing the bass, neither of which are very good at their instruments. But that changes when one day Scott is assigned Kim Pine as his lab partner.
Oh.
And at first she is like, oh, I got Scott. I'm going to have to do all the work. This sucks because he's a lazy boy.
Yeah.
But she eventually warms up to him, and over the course of high school, they eventually start to flirt with each other.
Oh.
Ooh. Kim is dating another boy from another school, the Benvie Tech High School.
That sounds like a fake boy.
One day, Scott comes to high school, and all of the kids are in chaos. There's a bunch of kids like dead on the floor. And Scott's like, what happened? And they're like, it was the Benvie Tech boys. They came and they beat everyone up and they stole Kim Pine. And he said, then I'm going to go save her, because at this point, it's less about being in a relationship, but he wants Kim to be the drummer in his band because Kim plays the drums.
A pragmatic choice.
Yeah. So he then travels to Benvie Tech High, and he goes and he beats up all the kids that are there, and he finds the quote final boss. It's this kid named Simon Lee, who is Kim's boyfriend, and she has been chained up at the top of the school, and Scott has a big final boss battle with him and beats him up and saves Kim and says, Kim, we should be dating, and also you should be the drummer in my band. And she agrees to both things.
There's a lot of commitment at once in a situation where there was a lot of peril.
Well, he just saved her. It was very,
that
it was
doesn't
very
mean she's
dramatic.
obligated.
That's usually when you ask a girl something. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
When she feels obligated, great.
So-
exactly. You said, excuse me,
Once
I
again.
just took the garbage out.
Once again.
Eerily
Not
similar
good
to how the
choices.
conversations go in my house. So this is when we can kind of introduce this idea of magical realism. The Scott Pilgrim universe is one that has a lot of fantasy magic elements, but everything's kind of played off as just sort of normal. And so Scott like beating up 100 kids in their high school to save Kim is a very video game style thing, and that's very much on purpose. There's a lot of that in this.
Isn't he also like a martial arts champion or something in his region or something like that?
He doesn't really have any like specific experience with anything. That's another thing that's very strange, is it's implied that Scott's very good at fighting.
But for no reason.
But he doesn't have any like training or anything.
But everyone knows he's good at fighting.
It is because he is a gamer.
Yeah, he does get a lot of his powers by playing video games. Like he can do the shoryuken and air juggle and stuff like that.
Yeah, this series is about the power of gaming.
Thank God. Well, I'm glad we can finally tell everyone about. We can evangelize the benefits of being a gamer, so we can stop the hate, stop the persecution.
We were talking about dating in high school, and I didn't have anything to say, but now we're getting back into my wheelhouse.
I like this now. And so that is Scott's kind of origin story. Eventually what happens is Scott and his parents move to Toronto towards the end of Scott's high school career. And the relationship between Scott and Kim kind of fizzles out. And
he made no effort to maintain it at a long distance.
Yeah, well, it is also older times. So I know it's hard to believe for the kids out there, but there was no Discord. There was no Skype. There were
phones.
There were phones, but there weren't cell phones.
You could not play Fortnite together.
Yeah, it was a worse time. But eventually, Scott goes on to go to university, as they say in Canada. where he meets two more young gentlemen, one Stephen Stills and Wallace Wells.
Hold on, what happened to his band Sonic and Knuckles?
I mean, it just kind of dissolved because he
moved.
Because he
Alright.
moved away.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The same thing kind of happens in college, where Wallace becomes Scott's friend just because he kind of annoys him until they are friends and just sort of bothers him. And Wallace is gay. And so he's constantly flirting with Scott and being like, "You're cute. I like having you around." And Scott's like, "I'm not gay." And he's like, "That's okay." So it's a very good relationship.
The series has a little bit of a weird relationship with homosexuality.
Well, so fun fact, Brian Lee O'Malley wrote the character Wallace and a bunch of Wallace's boyfriends around his actual roommate, who was actually also gay. And so he would always have his roommate bringing over boys and stuff and would like just get hit on in a playful way by him. And so he's based on a real person.
And he thought to himself, wouldn't it be funny if we all three slept in the same bed together?
Yeah, that would
Just
be crazy.
No homo, bro, but wouldn't that be pretty neat?
And so
I mean, if it's a small apartment, it's just, once again, the most pragmatic choice.
What can we do? I have no choice.
now that Scott is in university, he is, I guess, skilled enough at the bass where Stephen Stills, who is also a guitar player, decides that they should start a new band. And they also have another member because at university they meet two women, Julie Powers and Natalie Adams. And the last of two are roommates. So Julie and Natalie are roommates.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually Steven starts dating Julie and encourages Natalie to be in their band with her and Scott.
This makes a lot more sense watching the movie now.
Yeah. And so the three of them form a band called Kid Chameleon. There's another member who I think is like their percussionist. I say
Their drummer?
percussionist. No, because they start to do some more like experimental stuff.
Ah,
A lot of like chimes and, that kind of
like
stuff.
chimes.
You know how university is. So the three of them go on to do the band stuff for a while, and they actually start to be pretty successful. It turns out that between Steven and Natalie, they have a pretty good spread of talent to this young band. And they start to get courted by like record labels and stuff. And Natalie wants to pursue that life more. She becomes a little like enamored with the spotlight. Whereas Steven wants to do it more for the music. And Scott agrees with Steven, but pretty much solely on the basis of the other thing sounds like a lot more work.
Yeah,
and
as
he
I say,
doesn't really want to deal with all that.
Yeah.
So Natalie starts to go by her nickname, which is her first and middle initial put together, which is NV. And hence
It's a good stage name.
Hence is born Envy Adams.
That's a good stage name.
And
Good choices.
while they are in the band together during the good times, Scott and Envy start dating romantically.
Oh.
And
That's pretty serious.
It was pretty serious. But as the divide in their band grew and grew, then Envy kind of takes control of the band. There's a joke that she gets to decide what they do with the band because she is the band president, which she was voted into by the other two as well, who were just voting for her because she asked them to.
Yeah.
And so eventually Kid Chameleon breaks up, and because Envy wants to pursue a real music career. And once she starts doing that, then Scott says she stopped liking the music they made together, and then she stopped liking me, and then she broke up with him after a particularly bad haircut that he got. And this sort of emotionally influenced him for the rest of his life, or
And to never get a haircut again.
Yeah. And so he kind of goes into a depressive funk for 2 years. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in a depressive funk for 2 years.
Yes, you do.
But you tend to not remember stuff super well.
Yeah.
And so our story the actual story, the beginning of the book, begins after this 2-year depressive funk. Scott has gone through university. He does not remember if he graduated or not. He just knows that university is over. And he has been just kind of coasting through life. And that is where the books and the movie begin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he stays William Wallace's roommate and basically just mooches off of him.
Well, because that's the least amount of effort.
Yeah, so Wallace does Wallace gets like a desk job. It's kind of ambiguous what he does, like on purpose.
Right.
There's like scenes where he's just like drinking a martini at his desk, and he seems to like have a headset, like he takes calls.
Right.
So maybe he works at a call center. But he is the breadwinner and lets Scott live in his tiny apartment with him, but they are too poor to afford 2 beds, so they have to sleep in the same bed together. And also their apartment is just a single studio room, so they basically are constantly together when they are at home because they're just, as they say, too poor to afford separate beds. Again, so this is the point where we get into the movie. We're going to go over the movie a little bit just to kind of cover our bases. But we'll kind of backtrack and cover the differences because I don't want to spend too much time on the movie because, again, it's a good movie. So it's
a fun watch, for sure.
You should definitely see it if you haven't already. But we'll give you the highlights.
Yeah, you can check your streaming services or piracy.
Ethan, you can't say
condone.
that. Don't pirate this podcast.
Would you download a pizza?
That would be amazing.
Yeah. What?
You wouldn't download a pizza.
I would download a pizza. I'd put it in my tummy.
That sounds like the most amazing thing.
So we're at the beginning of the story for real now, and Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler.
Yeah. At the age of like 24.
This is a fun difference from the movie. In the movie, he is 22. 22.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, in the books, he was 23 going on to 24.
Yeah.
So they changed the age to make it a little
less
weird.
creepy.
But it's supposed to be weird. Yeah. So
it's not supposed to be a good thing. Once again.
Again, so Scott is a couple years out of university now. He is 23 years old. He doesn't really remember university all that well, and we kind of pick up where he is trying to leave his depressive funk. And he is trying to do so by dating 17-year-old Knives Chow, who's Chinese.
Oh.
And she goes to Catholic school, like with the uniform and everything.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to quote stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean,
for the dear listener, CJ has seen this movie so many times. He's just going to quote the entire thing while explaining it.
Yeah, that's fine. But no, I mean, that makes sense. It's like anyone who goes to Catholic school would kind of be used to predation. And so.
Right. So it's, I mean, that is why those exist to, I would say, prime, or maybe there's another word you could use to get the children ready.
This is a little much.
I don't know what word I would use necessarily, but something like that.
Goodness.
Oh, okay.
So the reason he's doing this is because he seeks a simple relationship, A, because he's lazy, but B, because he feels his last relationship was so kind of rocky and tumultuous that he just wants something simple to try and get over his ex, because he's still very much working through that.
Right.
So and dating a minor.
Yeah, he's working through that in a bad way.
It's not a good.
You're right. Yeah.
Once again, not supposed to be likable.
It's not just like a simple relationship either. It's a relationship where he has more of the power in the.
Yeah. Well, and
he must have. It's to make himself feel better.
Right, because in his relationship with Kim, I mean, no one really broke up with anybody.
Yeah.
So that didn't really hit his ego too bad, but Envy breaking up with him really like upset him to the point of he's basically doing a relationship on crutches so that he can wean his way back into it at his own pace, I guess.
He's rebounding at a very accessible level for him.
And so it's important to know Scott is our protagonist. And you are supposed to like him, but you're also supposed to recognize all of his many flaws. And he's
definitely a flawed protagonist.
Yeah, and he's very selfish, but he's not doing it vindictively. He just really doesn't think about others a lot. He's not particularly smart in general. And he's not doing things to be mean. Most of the time he's just doing things thoughtlessly.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those things where he's not really thinking of the ramifications, but he is going to start dating a high schooler.
So you would say he maybe needs to go on some kind of hero's journey to grow and become a better person?
I might say that, Ethan, if I was some sort of scholar.
And that's why you pay attention in your high school English classes, people, is that you learn to do literary analysis and not always feel like you have to like the protagonist or understand that protagonists have flaws.
That's true.
Pay attention.
And that's like a big thing. Like if I had to encourage you to like read the books over the movie, like that's a big thing, is there's a lot more about this like growth and development that Scott has. It's not just left on kind of a throwaway like in the movie, because the movie has to end in an hour and a half, where he's just like, and then he's better now because the movie's over. Like there's a lot more of like actual visual growth that he goes through, but we'll talk about that. We have some of the old characters have come back. Kim Pine has moved to Toronto after university, and she is now the drummer again for a band Scott is in with Steven Stills, and the three of them are called Sex Bob-omb. They make music that there's a lot of debate on the internet whether or not their band is good. If you listen to the movie soundtrack, like obviously the songs from the movie are good
because they were made by like actual musicians.
Yeah. Fun fact, Michael Cera actually does play the bass, and he's actually really good at it. And so in the movie, he had to pretend like he was worse at the bass than he actually is, because it's actually really good.
Yeah, I mean, the way it always came across to me was that Steven is legitimately good, but he's not confident. And Scott is actually pretty good, but he's not motivated to practice.
Yeah, he doesn't get better.
So like their previous band that they make wasn't carried just by envy. It's like they do have some talent there.
True. Yeah. And I think that sentiment kind of gets carried over. Also, I think it's important to note that generally speaking throughout the story, we're going to try and not get caught up in like what is or isn't, because not only is some of the things kind of left ambiguous on purpose, as we will say, but like this world does have that magical realism I mentioned, and it's kind of left to you as the reader to interpret what you think is real and what you think is kind of imagined between these characters, because it's a story, and stories are fun, so don't think about it too much. We're just here to tell you what we know, and then you get to decide how you feel about it.
Interpreting text.
Yeah, or you could think about it an awful lot and just like completely break down the text.
Yeah, I like that. But I came to the best conclusions, so I'll just tell you those.
Okay, that works.
So, everyone in Sex Bob-omb is ragging on Scott for dating a high schooler, as is well-deserved.
Well-deserved.
And we also are introduced to young Neil, who is Sex Bob-omb's biggest fan. He is younger than all of them, as the name implies, and he's not dreadfully important, so we're not going to talk about him too much. But I do like young Neil, and he has his own little like growth that he's going through. It's implied that he's going through a similar growth as Scott, but since he's younger, he's kind of doing it after Scott is. So he's kind of used as a barometer of how Scott is growing based on how he's acting, because he is kind of Scott, but like a couple years ago. So he'll come up every once in a while, but really just to kind of be a backdrop to show us what's going on with Scott.
You could say he's a foil or a deuteragonist or other fancy literature words.
I would not call him a deuteragonist.
Deuteragonist.
Mostly because that's just a silly word, and I just wouldn't use it. I wouldn't use it, Ethan.
We're fancy literature boys now, CJ.
So one day, Scott is taking a snooze because he sleeps till basically noon every day. Imagine.
Nice life.
But a girl is roller skating through his dreams. He's having his loneliness dream because, again, he's still very
He's got
Depressed.
depression.
He's got the depression. He
pressed.
exists in this place called the Lonely Desert, which is a place that shows up in his dreams a lot. But this girl slides on through his dreams, and he's like, "That's weird. I've never seen that girl before. I like the way she looks." But that's kind of where it ends for now. Until one day when he goes to a party and he sees that girl IRL and says, "She's the girl of my dreams," which he's using in a literal sense in this particular instance. But this is none other than Ramona Flowers, our main deuteragonist.
You could say that she is a metaphor for the synonym of capitalism.
You could say
What?
that if you wanted to.
That is
I
a take
wish-
I have not heard.
I wish that I had some fancy glasses on right now that I could adjust as I'm speaking.
you can
So,
borrow mine if you need
Ramona
it.
is a manic pixie dream girl, obviously. And Scott is immediately smitten by her and tries to impress her. And through his usual kind of Scott bumbling, he endears her to him, and he endears him to her. In any case, he eventually gets to the point where he goes on a little bit of a date with Ramona, and she kind of likes him too, because this is another thing that happens a lot in the books. And I think it's very cool, and you get to see it a lot play out in the books. But there's these like layered, they like layer a lot of the same themes over every character. And so we learned that Ramona was also in a pretty intense relationship. And so she starts dating Scott because she thinks that it would be a simple relationship that would be a lot easier to maintain, and that she would have a lot of the power over him because he would just do whatever she wants
And
to do.
he's just a sweet, bumbling nerd boy.
Right. And so we get a lot of these like parallels. Like a lot of these characters play the alternate role in the scenarios that they've already done, which is a really cool thing. It's like a very interesting thing. So Ramona is endeared by sort of Scott's simple nature, as he is, again, kind of an idiot. But the two of them start dating. But Scott never broke up with Knives Chow.
Yep.
Oh,
So he's now dating two girls at once.
And they don't know about each other.
They don't.
that's the part that makes it not okay.
And also, Knives is a high schooler.
Yeah, well.
Also that part.
So Scott has to go through his whole turmoil of basically breaking up with Knives, which, again, he's never really broken up with a girl from his perspective. His last relationships just kind of fizzle out. So that's hard for him. But Ramona lays on as well that, well, if they're going to be together, he is going to have to defeat all 7 of her evil exes. And this is where the magical realism really starts to kick off, because at this point, it becomes full video game style. There are 7 bosses that Scott must defeat in order to become Ramona's boyfriend.
Just like, that's the realist part, though. Whenever you get a serious girlfriend, you will have to defeat every one of her exes.
Yeah, that's why it's best to date
In a
nerd
metaphorical
girls,
sense.
because
In a metaphorical, literal sense.
yeah, in the literal sense. That's why it's good to date girl nerds, because all of their ex-boyfriends are a bunch of
will be
weak
easy
little
to defeat.
boy nerds,
Ah!
and there's usually not that many of them.
Uh-huh. It's until you get one that unfortunately has a previous Scott Pilgrim boyfriend.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and name all 7 of them without looking at my notes.
Okay.
All right.
There's Matthew Patel.
Yep. First one.
There's Lucas Lee.
Yep.
Todd Ingram. There is, who's after? Oh, there's Roxy Richter.
Yep.
There's the Katianagi twins, and then there's Gideon Graves.
All right.
There it is. Good job.
Thank you.
Twins? at the same time.
Yeah. So
God, it's so hot.
each of the books is focused around Scott defeating like one of the evil X's.
Pretty sure there are indeed
there's
7 volumes.
There's 6 volumes.
Oh.
But in one of them, he's fighting the twins.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So that's why there are 6 books and not 7.
Got it.
Brian Lee O'Malley, as a person who loves video games and presumably the numerology in video games, you'll see a lot of themes of 7 and 3, especially because those are big themes in Legend of Zelda games. In Link to the Past, you have to fight 7 bosses before you can beat Ganon, or you have to collect 7 pieces of the Triforce, or you have to collect 3 things in order to unlock something. And so there's a lot of theming in that as well.
3 is a magic number.
I could talk like all day about all the different themings, especially in the movie that they did, because Brian Lee O'Malley was a consultant on set on the movie, which is one of the reasons it is
Good.
so closely.
I think that's literally what we're here for.
Well, what I want to talk less about the movie and more about the differences between the movie and the books.
And how the books help support what happens.
So Scott goes through and defeats these 7 X's. The first, Matthew Patel, is an Indian heritage boy. He has the magical abilities to fly, shoot fireballs, and summon a backing crew of manic pixie chicks to fight with him.
He has Bollywood powers.
Yeah, it's
great.
very good. And he's sort of our, like, he breaks the mold of what you expect this to be kind of like a millennial love drama story, and then all of a sudden it turns into like a fighting bosses story, and he just like absolutely breaks it changes in tone immediately when he starts fighting him. And then that's when we kind of get the tone for the rest of the movie. The second evil X, Lucas Lee, is a skater boy
who turns into Captain America.
Yeah, well, he is Captain America in the movie. But he turns into an actor as he grows up. And so he's just very cool. That's his power. Todd Ingram is
he's also a good skateboarder.
He's a pretty good skateboarder.
Yeah.
Todd Ingram is a vegan psychic. We will learn that being vegan gives you psychic powers.
I just did.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about Todd later, because I think Todd's one of the more important X's.
Sure, yeah.
Then there's Roxy Richter, who is a woman.
And a ninja.
Yeah.
2 things. Amazing.
Also Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Also, she played with Michael Cera in Arrested Development as Michael Cera's girlfriend, on and off again from Arrested Development.
Very cute.
It is. We have the Katyanagi twins, who are famous musicians and also genius roboticists.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that.
And then finally, there's Gideon Graves, who is the final boss and
the most recent
ringleader of
He's
all of the
wealthy.
7 X's. He's very rich. He owns a record label, and his identity is unknown until the very end of the series. The movie basically follows Scott going through and fighting all of the evil X's and winning Ramona's heart, etc., etc. He
does break up with Knives Chow at some point.
He does. So let's talk about the differences that they don't have in the movie that they do have in the books. First of all, they go back into Ramona's history with each of the X's a lot more. For instance, Matthew Patel, the first evil X, they basically dated for like 2 weeks in middle school, and he still got included as one of the evil X's. They make jokes in the book that they're like, yeah, he just kind of showed up and was like still really into Ramona, even though it's been like 8 years and they were like kids when they dated, and it was for like 2 weeks. There's a really good joke where Todd uses his vegan psychic powers to punch a hole in the moon for Ramona.
Yep.
But if you notice, the moon has 2 holes in it. And as we learn, Todd and Envy were also dating during high school, during high school. And then after college as well. And when Todd got his vegan powers, he also punched a hole in the moon for Envy. And when Ramona reveals this to Envy, she's like, "Didn't you ever wonder why there were 2 holes in the moon?" And she was like, "No."
I wish that Siley was here right now, because I immediately wanted to say when we were talking earlier, just like Indian boyfriends do be like that though.
See that? Fantastic.
That is a thing that she would have gone off about.
So one of the biggest deviations from the movie, I guess
from the books.
Yeah, one of the biggest deviations that are from the books is that there is a pretty lengthy segment about Lisa Miller returning into Scott's life. If you recall, they went to high school together. Around the third and fourth Evil X's, which are the third and fourth books, Lisa Miller returns to town. She has grown up to be a middling actress. She is in a soap opera, a Canadian soap opera, and she starts to integrate into the rest of the friend group. So again, we have
so it's an entire character. That's just not
right. That was cut. They make a mention to it in the movie when Julie is listing off all of the exes that Scott had, and she was like, "What about that time with Lisa?" And he was like, "Well, that was nothing." And he's like, "That time with the other one, who is another character from the book who isn't in the movie." And they didn't actually date in the book either, but Brian Lee O'Malley just wanted to reference them from the books. So they mention her by name once in the movie as a little Easter egg, basically. But when she comes back, she starts to show us some important things that we have missed in the narrative. Because as we go through the books, everyone keeps telling Scott things that he just kind of disagrees with, and that the books have so far not shown us at all. Like when Julie calls Scott a lady killer, and he's like, that's not really who I am. And then she lists off all of his exes, and he was like, that wasn't really any big things. And then Lisa comes back to town and talks about like all of the times that they had when they were younger, and he just like doesn't remember any of these things. Lisa goes on to integrate in the rest of the friend group. There's Scott and Steven and Kim. There's also young Neil, and they collect another few people who come and go. Wallace will hang out with them a little bit, but he seems like he's got his own friend group. So you get this, like, it's a really genuine, like, it feels really genuine in how Brian set up his characters. Right. It really feels like a bunch of millennials right after university. Yeah. And they'll like hang out with each other, and then they go to a particular bar for a while and just like do that regularly for a bit, and then just stop doing it eventually. So he has all these like little tiny details that are like, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like to be in your early 20s.
When did these books first come out again?
2004.
Yeah. So this is what millennial friend hanging out used to be like before what the economy collapsed.
Yeah.
A couple of times.
Yeah, you know. Well, yeah, when it was like you could still be very poor but still like have a place to live and stuff to eat. And so yeah, it feels really genuine. As we learn, Lisa had a bit of a thing for Scott, and still kind of does, maybe.
Oh.
This is where we're introduced to the idea that while Ramona has her evil exes, Scott too has his, people call them Scott's evil ex-girlfriends, which is a little weird. But the idea is they're setting up of like everyone kind of vilifies their exes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so while Ramona has 7 evil exes, Scott has 3, being Kim Pine, Lisa Miller, and Envy Adams. Other people will say that Knives is an evil ex, which kinda, yeah.
Does Knives show up as much in the comics as
she probably shows up more?
More, really? For sure. Yeah, there's a whole thing that they skip out in the series where Knives' dad is like, you are dating an older man and you are in high school? I will destroy him.
That's incorrect, right, I remember. Ethan.
Okay, it was...
He says, you're dating a white boy? I will destroy him.
Boy, that was it. It's been a little bit.
I do vaguely remember Knives' dad.
Yeah, so Lisa Miller shows up, and then she starts to kind of drive a wedge between Scott and Ramona. In the movie, this correlates to the part where Roxy shows up and is driving a wedge between them. It's the same kind of area in the book, but
They couldn't introduce a whole new character.
right. So instead of Roxy driving the wedge as much, she still does in the books, but Lisa is also kind of driving a wedge. And she's not necessarily trying to steal Scott away or anything, but she just has feelings for him and then eventually admits that. But in the end, Scott rebuffs her advances and says that he wants to be with Ramona.
Making choices.
And
amazing.
They do not sleep together, and they do this thing where Lisa basically propositions him, and then Scott kind of passes out, and then he wakes up the next day and he's like, what happened? Did I cheat on Ramona? And Lisa has to like tell him the events of the night that that didn't happen, and that he said he wanted to be with Ramona, and then they ordered pizza and ate so much pizza they passed out. But we get this idea that like the book is following Scott's point of view. Everything that's happening to him is happening like through his own perception of it, and we are like looking at his perception, which you can pick up on because like, you know, as Fran said, there's little text boxes that introduce everybody. Scott, like all of them are very biased towards like Scott's opinion of that person. Like he rates himself 10 out of 10 when he introduces himself. And he like, you know, he really vilifies Envy as this like crazy evil person when in reality it's probably not so much that. Envy is also a good example of a departure from the books in the movie, if only because they didn't have enough time to like showcase her as much. She kind of has her own arc. She definitely wants the spotlight. She wants to be a singer star. But she has a lot of her own things that she's working through. And it's revealed that Scott's memory of the past is not very good. Because as she points out, when they broke up, she didn't just break up with him. Scott got really drunk and got in an argument with her. And then after the argument, they broke up. And that's very weird because Scott's like, I don't drink really. And so again, we get this idea that he like will say things that aren't true. And he gets confused why other people are saying things that are true. But in his from our perspective, it looks like they're lying because we are seeing the world from Scott's perspective.
I'm assuming that's paralleled in the movie when him and Ramona have like a pseudo fight then. When Roxy shows up.
Yeah, they don't do.
And then she's like, I thought you didn't drink. And he says.
Right, yeah. That was a reference to that. Yeah. And they, you know, there just isn't enough time in the book to like do this whole like fake out past thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the movie too, like as a theme, it really shows this like idea of contrast between like growing up by selling out and growing up by doing it the right way, you know?
Right.
That they don't do that same exact thing in the book, and so it makes sense for Envy to be more of a like irredeemable character in the movie because she is just representative of part of the sellout culture.
Right. Let's talk about some of the deep lore of the books that we don't get in the movie.
Hell yeah.
And these are things that are not just differences between the book and movie, but are like completely either not present in the movie or just like unexplained in the movie. But again, there's all this magical stuff that happens,
like the big hammer coming out of Ramona's purse.
Right. So subspace is a reality that is intertwined with our reality, but also its own separate space. Again, there's a lot of digital ink about what it is and like what the mechanics are, and people will be like, these are the rules to the subspace world, and it's a narrative thing. It represents like a magical dimension space, like the warp zones in video games, you know. Video games. And yes, Ramona also has a hammer space that is in her purse that is connected to subspace.
It's just like all women's purses.
True.
The black hole in there, truly.
Subspace is is like a really cool thing. Again, it kind of like intersects with a bunch of people's like perception, I guess. It exists as like a real space you can travel through. Like Ramona uses it as a shortcut to get places. And it also is like where you go when you dream or where your memories are. And so there is a lot more in the books about like subspace existing. Sometimes doors to subspace just appear. It seems to be one of those things that once you are savvy to it, you start to see it around more. For instance, like Scott and the rest of his friends have never heard of it before. There's a line in the movie where Ramona where I was really confused by this, but in the movie Ramona's like, yeah, there's this like subspace route that goes through your head, so I like to use that. And Scott's like, what is that? And Ramona's like, oh, I forgot you don't have that here. I thought she meant sarcasm. Like I thought she was like, oh, I forgot Canadians don't use sarcasm here.
It's implied that she's from America.
Right, she is from America.
Yeah.
But no, she's talking about subspace. I guess they just don't use subspace in Canada.
They got free healthcare. They don't need
I
subspace.
Guess not. But yeah, once she starts to like show Scott with like once she starts to take Scott through the subspace with her, he starts to notice it more to the point of eventually he's able to like find doors and use them without Ramona.
And so that part of the movie where a door shows up.
Right. And this happens a couple times, like what Ethan said when he's fighting Mr. Chow. He goes through a door and the door ends up coming out of Ramona's purse because, again, it's all kind of connected through the subspace. And so that's this sort of like mind space area that has some ambiguous rules that we're going to talk about having some other mechanics right now. Another thing that just doesn't show up in the movie at all, that's a very important part of the books, is the glow.
I don't remember that part.
Neither did me or Lizzie when we both started
The glow?
doing this. So in the comics, there are times when like either there's a big emotional impact or the characters have a big realization.
I do vaguely remember.
And then their head just starts glowing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in the context of a comic book, it just looks like a shocked, like, kind of like a halo behind your head to indicate like a shocked face. But canonically, their head is actually glowing.
Right, yeah, it's fourth wall nonsense.
Yeah.
That shit CJ loves.
I do.
It's good stuff.
The glow is an actual mechanic within the world. It exists, and as we learn, it was invented by Gideon in order to mentally manipulate people. For you see, Gideon is not only rich and cool and owns a company, but he also is a master of subspace and has invented the glow, which is where Ramona learned how to use subspace from Gideon.
Oh.
So Gideon uses the glow and narratively the glow is used as the idea of like being in your own head. It shows up when you have a lot of self-doubt or when you kind of feel foolish because you like, in Ramona's case, sometimes she will trust Scott and then will be betrayed and then she feels bad and then she blames herself and her head starts to glow. Eventually the glow infects Scott as well as he starts to think of himself as a bad person for doing bad things, and it gets in his own head. We learned that Gideon invented the glow in order to like control people better. Because it basically makes you put yourself down and then you become more susceptible to just being told what to do.
So he made the embodiment of like a toxic relationship
Yeah.
as a glow.
Yeah.
Great.
So
So he's an actual evil ex. Then.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Gideon more. But that also leads us to a second thing that is a little bit in the movie, but not touched on a lot, but the idea of Nega Scott. Whenever Scott starts to feel bad about himself in the books, oftentimes he'll see his reflection and he will see a dark, reflection of his own form,
Like
known
Darklink?
as Nega
Just
Scott.
like in Zelda.
That's right, Ethan.
Yeah.
It is just like in Zelda. Why are we all whispering?
Darklink.
So Nega Scott is he is the embodiment of all of Scott's negative personality traits. But as we start to figure out, it's less about his negative personality traits and it's more about the parts of Scott that he doesn't like about himself.
Oh, is that why that's that why his memories are so bad?
That's
because
right.
Nega Scott has all of them?
Whenever he has a bad memory, he basically puts it into Nega Scott. So Scott's able to use Nega Scott to kind of get around the glow because whenever he feels bad, he basically compartmentalizes it into Nega Scott. And so the glow doesn't hinder him too much, but it's also a huge weakness around him because he doesn't remember his mistakes. So he never learns from his mistakes because he just ignores them. Like he doesn't like to feel bad. So he puts all the bad feelings away and then he puts himself into more situations where he feels bad. And that's why Nega Scott exists. And we learn that again, because we're seeing this from Scott's perspective. Nega Scott is framed as like negative Scott, like an evil Scott, but it's actually just the parts of Scott he doesn't like. So he ignores them and he pushes them away. And perhaps Nega Scott is not even really like a bad thing. It just is part of him that he rejects.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is, again, like those things are in the movie. Nega Scott's in the movie and they do a little joke with him. But the development with him is more towards the ends of the books. And fun fact, when the movie was made, the 5th book was still in production while the movie was being made, and the 6th book hadn't even come out yet. So the actual story didn't have an ending yet. The ending of the movie was, kind of greenlit by Brian because he was on set. But he hadn't like finished his like full story yet. So he didn't really know what to do with a lot of that stuff. But he ended up doing a lot more with Nega Scott than I think he just kind of liked that idea, which is neat because it is a neat idea. So the main divergence are happening like towards the 5th and 6th books where we're at. Again, I said the Katayanagi twins are
roboticists,
expert roboticists. That never comes up in the movie, but in the
but they're sweet DJs.
In
which
the
is
5th
also
book,
cool.
Scott is constantly being accosted by a bunch of just robots, like progressively stronger robots that he has to beat up, and it's like driving his friends away. Again, another like a very like realistic thing that's happening is their friend group starts to shatter under all of this pressure. Steven wants to focus on the band more. He meets a guy named Joseph who is like a sound guy, like he has a lot of sound equipment,
right?
And Steven's really interested in the sound stuff and like wants to sound really good for his band, so he starts hanging out with Joseph all the time. Young Neil starts to become a dick and everyone just kind of stops liking hanging out with him, and they all say, oh well, you're still young, you'll grow out of it. He dated Knives for a while. That part was in the movie. Knives was just doing it to make Scott jealous, and young Neil was doing it because he probably just liked Knives, and they're more appropriately aged.
Right. He is young Neil.
Exactly.
She's still 17 though.
But
yeah, but
maybe 18 at that point.
Right, but if he's like 18 too, it's like that's whatever.
He was the two of them broke up, which again just kind of drove the group apart even more. I think young Neil starts dating either one of Knives' friends or just another Chinese girl to try and get Knives to be jealous. Again, this idea of like, these patterns are repeating.
Hurt people.
Whoa, that's right, Ethan. What eventually happens with the twins, though, is after they're done sending all these robots at Scott, they kidnap Kim. And then we get the same thing that happened in the opening.
Parallel.
Where Scott has to go save Kim from the twins. And he does so, but this time when he's fighting, he's losing against the twins' big robot. And Kim encourages him to fight harder because she said that she got a text from Ramona saying that she believes in him, and he uses that as like power to to win the fight, but in reality she did not receive a text like
Yeah.
that.
That works on me also.
So we kind of get this closure with Kim then of like, because Kim also kind of likes Scott still, and they never really got good closure. But the big thing that happens about this is Scott was like, yeah, this is crazy. It was just like that the time in high school. And she was like, it was nothing like that, Scott. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then she goes back to the opening story that we talked about. But this time it shows her boyfriend in high school. And we learned that she also was dating her boyfriend in high school. And then she moved away to Scott's school. And then their relationship started to fizzle out. And then Scott basically just went to his high school and beat up her old boyfriend because he wanted to date her. And then that happened. And so we see now that Scott's memories are all kind of wrong.
He paints himself as the hero.
And we also see that the way that Scott saw Kim's ex-boyfriend and the way Kim described her ex-boyfriend are like completely different. They're like different people.
Right. Yeah, it's the whole thing, like it's not just that like Scott isn't remembering things, but he like falsely justifies them in his head, right?
Yeah, he justifies his actions.
There's the whole, it's the whole idea of like, he doesn't just go like beat this boyfriend up directly so that he can steal his girlfriend. In his mind, he's like, well, them still having a long distance relationship is holding King down, so it is as if she is being held captive.
Sort of. Gideon has many powers, like he's a master of the subspace, and being a master of the subspace allows him to enter people's subconscious mind and see their backstories through their own memories, which he did to Scott in order to gain more information to fight him for Ramona's love.
Okay.
Through this, he also, I guess, decided to mess around with a bunch of Scott's memories.
Great.
So the reason he sees Kim's ex-boyfriend as just a different guy is because he basically inserted himself as Kim's ex-boyfriend and then made this memory of them fighting epically over Kim, when in fact that just didn't happen at all.
Oh.
So part of it is him misremembering, but also Gideon has the power of mental manipulation.
Convenient.
There's a lot of cool superpowers that happen. For instance, I mentioned that Todd is a psychic because he's a vegan. And when asked why being vegan gives you psychic power, it says because his mind isn't filled with curds and whey. And then Kim's like, oh yeah, did you learn that at Vegan Academy? So he actually did learn that at Vegan Academy. He goes to Vegan Academy to learn to be a vegan and psychic. But what we also learn is you don't have to be a vegan to be psychic. One day Wallace shows up and he comes in from the rain and he uses his chi energy to dry himself from the rain. And Scott's like, oh, that's crazy. How'd you do that? And he's like, oh, I have a new boyfriend. His name's Mobile. He is a psychic. And he's like, your boyfriend's a vegan? He's like, no, he's psychic for his own reasons. So apparently you can just be psychic
for your own reasons.
I assume there's this whole thing around the vegans trying to like create this vegan world order and like indoctrinating people into thinking you have to be vegan to be psychic. And there's a bunch of fan theories you could get into there, but we only do canon here.
I mean, that's a bunch of Akira reference stuff.
That's
whole different ballpark.
But Gideon's motivations to all this are he wants to collect Ramona. And now we're going to get to the part where we kind of describe this whole thing, like all the themes wrapping around onto each other. Earlier I said that Todd is one of the more important exes because in a lot of ways Todd represents what Scott is and what Scott isn't. I mean, a lot of their like parallels are pretty.
This one you actually would call a foil.
Yeah, well, a lot of their parallels are very obvious. Like they're both the bass player in their band,
in Envy's band.
The like visuals they set up are like Todd has his big 3 on his t-shirt because he's the third evil X, and Scott has a big 0 on his t-shirt because he is like the 0th X of envy, like he just doesn't matter. But they're shown to be similar in like a lot of ways. They're both pretty stupid. They're both like kind of lazy. Like Todd's supposed to be a vegan, but he really just doesn't care about the rules that much, so he just isn't a vegan really.
And that's why the vegan police show
And that's
up.
why the vegan police take away his vegan powers. But another thing that's very similar is that Todd is also a cheater, and he cheats on Envy with their drummer, who is a cyborg, which we don't really have time to get into that whole thing. But
I mean, you got it. She's a cyborg.
In the Clash at Demon Head, it's also a 3-piece band, and the drummer is a cyborg girl who cheats on, who cheats with Todd. And so we kind of see Todd as this, he's supposed to be one of the evil X's, but he's the most similar to Scott of any of them. And so we realize that Scott is already like dangerously close to being an evil X. Then we have Gideon, who is, I guess, like an extreme example of what what Scott could be if he kind of follows down this path he's on. Gideon's whole modus operandi is he wants to control everything. But specifically, he wants complete control over all of his exes. In the same way that Ramona has her 7 evil exes, Gideon also has his 7 evil exes.
Oh.
But what Gideon decided is he wants to control all of them forever. And what's revealed in the last book is that he has a bunch of cryopods. He has 7 of them, 1 for each of his exes. And he's been collecting his ex-girlfriends and putting them in there to store them.
So he's trying to collect Ramona to store her in a cryogenic chamber.
Ramona is the 7th of his exes that he wants to finish his collection.
That is messed up.
Well, and he
straight up.
I mean, a lot of what he does is like, it's not even about like the sexual stuff, but he's like, I like dressing up my girls in different outfits and then having them like perform on stage. Like he just likes owning them like a doll.
It's a total power.
Objectifying, yeah.
He likes to own them and like put them on stage for others to see and then be like, that's my girlfriend. So that's his whole like, that's like why he's doing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
We also learned that the whole 7 evil X thing was he got really drunk one night and went and posted a Craigslist ad looking for any of Ramona's evil exes, and apparently they all responded to the Craigslist ad.
It was pre-2008. It was a different time.
Yeah.
It's very good. And so we as the audience now know that this story is told from Scott's perspective, but that there's all this meddling from Gideon as this like evil specter of what Scott could be, and has been like implanting all of these ideas in his mind that he's the good guy, because that's how Gideon sees himself also. He's like, what he thinks he's in the right, that all these girls belong to him. It's it's a statement about how when you break up with a person, a lot of people still want to like control that person. They want to like tell them that they can't date other people, or that they can't move on with their lives.
Right. So it's funny to say because the movie is so over the top, but the book is just like a more over the top version of the movie stuff. Like in the movie, they just kind of like say very basely like, Gideon broke up with me, but it was when I actually got over him that he was like, that he wanted me back because he didn't feel like he had power over me anymore.
Exactly.
And in this one, they're like, well, we'll be a little more literal and say he wants to put her in a cryopod forever.
Right. Well, and also, Envy dates Gideon for a while as well. She signs with his label.
Right.
But she never really has any power in their relationship, and as a result he just really doesn't care that much about her. So I said Envy has her own arc. She eventually again, like overarching, this is about Scott growing as a person. Part of that is for Scott to confront his past, but it's also to resolve a bunch of his unresolved issues, both with himself and others. So for instance, Scott eventually like talks with Knives in the books, and Knives is like, I mean, I still really love you, but like it's not healthy for us to be together. And like it's a moment where Knives kind of grows in maturity beyond Scott because she was in this relationship that she wasn't ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And like that gives her a lot of insight going forward. And she's like, I just need to learn to love myself right now. And Scott is like, this is between Scott and Ramona dating. Like she's kind of taken off at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like trying to figure things out. And he like sees this maturity, and he's like, oh, maybe you can, like, if not, like, you can come to resolution with your exes. It doesn't have to be like everyone's world revolves around you, and like you have to figure out how to make everyone still like you even when you're broken up. It's just, you know, realizing that you had a relationship, it's over, it's time to move on, and we can still like both be adult about it.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, Scott has to, I mean, again, Scott confronts Lisa Miller from his past and gets conclusion there, as both in her being like, well, I did like you and still do like you, and Scott never, I guess, realizing that, and then having to come to terms with like, well, do I have feelings for this girl that I never really thought about I had feelings for? And then similarly for Kim, when he saves Kim from the twins, and then she describes all this stuff from their past in a new way, and she also is like, well, you never even really broke up with me, Scott. Like, I didn't even know you were moving away. I had to hear from Lisa that you had moved away because you didn't even tell me. And he just didn't remember that he didn't do that because he didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like he has to get Kim's forgiveness as well for doing that, and for like not even acknowledging that he did that for a long time.
Yep.
And then finally there's Envy, which is one of the hardest ones for them to deal with. But, you know, he is like, he's sad throughout the whole books that he and Envy broke up pretty much. And even when he's with Ramona, it still like haunts him. And
hence why he refuses to get a haircut.
Well, and his like biggest growth too is when he and Envy like finally find some closure. It's also while he and Ramona are dating again. So they're not like at odds with each other anymore. They're finally like, okay, this is what I want to do going forward. And Ramona kind of sees what Envy's been going through because she also dated Gideon. And so she gets like what that feels like. And so she kind of gets where Envy's coming from. Because even Envy at the end still seems like she has some feelings for Scott. And that's a big part of it too, is like all of these people still have feelings for each other, even after their relationships. But, you know, it's about being an adult and, you know, getting closure on that and then moving on.
I don't like it. It's lame.
No.
Being an adult.
I would rather put all of my exes in cryopods.
Yeah. Well, and so that's eventually how Scott beats Gideon. Is Gideon can't grow. Like he can't learn. He's super powerful, but he doesn't adapt. And eventually what Scott ends up doing is merging with Nega Scott. He gets all of his memories back, the good ones and the bad ones. And he's able to, like, Gideon's fucking with him for the full final fight because he's trying to get in his head, both literally and figuratively. And so it like enables the glow on Scott, and Scott uses that opportunity to headbutt Gideon really hard, which transfers the glow onto Gideon. And then Gideon gets trapped in his own head, and it's just wild in there. And because he like never has like self-inflection or introspection, he like gets lost in there and loses control over Ramona, and that's when they're able to defeat him, when he's undone by his own petard.
That's why I never introspect.
That's right, Ethan.
I might get lost in there.
That's the moral of that story. And then in the end, Scott and Ramona decide that they want to try it again, but to try and be more honest with themselves and with each other, and to kind of start over and see if they really like each other. And then that's how the book ends. It's also how the movie ends. The movie, fun fact, had 3 separate endings that they filmed because, again, they didn't really know how the story was going to end. So there's an ending where there's the canon ending where Scott and Ramona get together. There's the alternate ending where Ramona tells Scott that he was fighting for knives all along, and then Scott is with knives. And then there's also the third ending where the 2 girls are just like, we actually either of us really don't like you that much anymore. And then Scott is with neither of them.
That one probably didn't do well in the screeners.
There's also a non-canon ending if you beat the Scott Pilgrim video game, where if you win as Scott, then both Knives and Ramona want to be your girlfriend, and then he gets 2 girlfriends.
Which I felt like bringing up for no particular reason. It's
pretty
just
cool, I think. I don't know.
I just say I've perhaps found the best ending.
But I really like this series. It's one of my it is my favorite like graphic novel series because I don't have a lot. And because Full Metal Alchemist doesn't count as that because it's a manga. And
that's cheating.
It just has a lot of really good themings. Like I said, it does a really good job of like setting up these situations, but then the characters are playing out these situations from different views. And there's all this like magical stuff that happens, and everyone's just kind of like, that just kind of happens sometimes.
Which is just fun.
Yeah, it's a really fun world.
The fun world where you can learn about yourself and grow.
Also, does all that like, metaphorical you grow and learn stuff is good. But other important difference from the book to the movie is that Steven Stills is gay in the end.
Yeah, so at the end, Joseph, the sound guy that he hangs out with, it turns out that Joseph's always was gay.
Yeah.
But then he finds out that Steven and Joseph started dating because Steven found out that he's gay too. Mm-hmm. So the 2 of them are dating, and like towards the end of the book, towards the end of all the books, Scott like gets back into a depression because Ramona broke up with him. Mm-hmm. And so there's another like time lapse in the middle of the books where like stuff is happening. And then like Scott's just been living in this apartment that his parents were paying for. And he like starts to dissociate a lot. He doesn't realize how like long time is. And he like kind of comes back out into the world. He had a job for a while, but then he just quit and stopped working because he got very sad.
Wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. But. And then eventually he goes back out and he meets with all his friends, and they're like, dang, Scott, you've been away for a while, huh? It's only been like a week or 2. And they're like, it's been months. But when he goes out, like everything is different. Like Julie is really mad at Steven and he doesn't know why. And then he meets with Steven, and it turns out Steven's gay now and is with Joseph. And young Neil is also like super like a dick and angsty now. And so it's this weird, like, it's a very anime thing to have a time lapse in the middle of your anime, but normally at the end of it, like everyone's more powerful and has new moves. But in this one, everyone's just doing different things and is either worse off or just like more angry gay. Or more gay or all of it. Like Wallace and his boyfriend are, I guess, very serious at the end of it. And he's like, you're living with your boyfriend? He's like, yeah, he's psychic. So yeah, there's a bunch of like small details. Again, I could go on forever describing all of them, but I really like it. I give this series a really cool out of nice.
Okay. And we won't do that again because that's... This is not a review channel.
No, it's not. But let us know if you liked us talking about things we like instead of talking about things we don't like. Because I like the things I like, but I can understand how it's more funny to listen to me hate about stuff.
We can, we'll try to adjust a little more towards the middle.
Yeah.
So at least one of us will like something. And then
ideally it would be something that like Ethan likes that I hate, because people get mad when Fran likes a thing and then I hate on it, and they're like, you should let Fran like things. And I'm like, well, but if Ethan likes something and I hated on it, you wouldn't say that. You'd be like, like when the white men fight.
Yeah.
I mean, it is funny when the white men fight.
We definitely need one of those. And then I think our sweet spot is the stuff that we like, but can also objectively agree is bad.
Right.
Like
That's
World of
fine.
Warcraft lore, but we're not getting into that.
Well, that's too much, Fran.
We're not going to do that one.
So obviously I'm a bit biased on this one as a depressed boy who doesn't remember much about their college years for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
I relate to this character.
Have you absorbed Nega CJ yet?
I have not.
That was honest.
Fair.
And so
I feel like you've absorbed parts of him.
And so I talk this up a lot, but I think this is a very good story made by a very skilled storyteller. So definitely check this one out. And hey, check out more of us. That's right. I tricked you, Ethan. We're at the end of the episode.
What?
That's right.
Amazing.
We are Cooking with Spices. This is our channel. This is our podcast. Check out our other stuff. Ethan and I just released a little mini-sode last week.
It was only kind of mini.
We're not good at mini.
It's gonna be minier.
Even minier next time.
20 minutes, swear to God, next time. But hopefully we can do a little bit more of that. That was just a chill lore you more, where we just talk about some of the most recent stuff that happens. If you like that,
the lore that is more.
If you like that more laid back energy where we just talk about things going on right now, let us know. But otherwise, give us the likes, the subscribes. We love the love, and we love to hate.
Need it.
I don't know. I'll be fine either way.
We love to hate, but good God, do we need affection in return?
Thanks again to Galestorm Kitsune for doing the artwork for the channel, and to Pajo for the intro and outro songs, which we used in the More You lore, but it was all blubby because I don't know why. I just wanted to change it up.
Okay.
Guys, what do you want to say for the ending? You know how we sometimes do a little goof, a little joke at the end?
I don't have a goof.
I was going to do my little goof. I would say, Nega, Ethan, and I go out for brunch sometimes, but we decided to just stay friends.
Well, I've been CJ.
I've been Ethan.
And I've been Fran.
Take your Nega self to brunch.